Hello, welcome to Go Big Now Live. This is the show where we interview underrepresented founders who have built multi-million dollar businesses from scratch. How did they do it? What big mindset shifts did they have to make? And how can you make them too? If you are looking to build a business or you have a business, this is the show where you can find out what changes you could be making to get over that seven-figure hurdle. Right now, only 2% of women business owners ever get to 1 million in revenues. And for women of color, that is less than 1%. We are part of a number of organizations working to change that here at Million Dollar Women. And we today have an amazing guest who is one of our graduates and now serves on our board of Million Dollar Women. Palak Shah is a real estate investor, and she went from slogging it out in corporate America to being a stay-at-home mom with her two kids to real estate investing, where she now has a $10 million portfolio with her husband, Niti. And they even coach other people in attaining this same kind of success in the real estate space. So excited to share her story with you. And Palak, come join me.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Julia.
So great to have a chance to have this live conversation. How was photo day, by the way? Did the kids make a good face for the photos?
Well, when they left the house, it was all good. We'll see.
I know, you always get back those photos and it's like, wait, I told you to take the sweater off, but you didn't.
What did you do to my hair?
Sure, yes. Exactly. I'm sure they're going to look awesome. As long as they don't have like stuff all over their face, it's good.
All good.
So, I know that you and I have talked a lot about how we were both kind of unlikely entrepreneurs, right? I studied film and my parents were academics. I don't think you were raised with like, you should go start your own business, right? So when you were growing up, what were some of the messages you were given about what it would look like to be successful in your career?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. We don't talk about this enough because I think if you are the child of employees, that's what the gold standard is in your household, right? And I think starting a business almost becomes like breaking a generational cycle because all we know, all we are taught is to to get that great job. So yeah, I was told get a higher
and then keep it no matter what, right? Even if it's
yeah.
like not working for your lifestyle or your personal goals and dreams.
Right. Exactly. Keep it whether you're getting promoted or not, whether you're getting appreciated or not, whether you're getting enough, making enough money or not, just keep that job.
So do you think that if you had told your younger self, like you're going to own your own business one day with your husband and just be making up everything on your own, would you have been like, no way? Or did you always have a little bit of an entrepreneurial drive?
I always wanted to do something big, but I didn't know that it was with a business. When I was growing up, and sometimes I think about it and I feel like I don't know how much impact that had on me, but I still remember. By the way, I had not been in an airplane until I turned 21. Like we didn't never had money for that. We never took vacations. We, lived in a one-bedroom house. It was just my mom and I. But
Where
my
was
mom
that? Just so we can situate
I
it.
grew up in India.
Okay,
Grew up
what
in
part?
India, in Gujarat, the western part of India. My mom was a teacher. We, I mean, we had a good life, but we never had money. I grew up on hand-me-downs. We never had a lot of money. But my mom used to tell me, I still remember when I was 5, 6 years old, and I would take a long time to get out of the house. You know how like all kids do that. My my mom, I still remember my mom would say that, when you grow up, you're gonna miss an important flight. And we were nowhere close to even affording a plane ticket. And my mom
I
used to
love
say,
that.
and I wonder if these things, have an impact on how
Just
you start
planting that
perceiving.
seed, right? Of like, well, one day you're going to be this successful, we don't know what. So you got to
Yes.
build these habits early.
Yeah. So she used to say that. And I wonder if these things have an impact, whether, your parents may not know that, hey, growing a business is better than being an employee, but they know that they want you to do something big.
Yeah. And you moved here at what age again?
I was 21. My first flight I took was to come to America.
That's really incredible because you've just built so much in such a short time. And, I'd love to just kind of fast forward because you came here, you sort of got the immigrant dream, right, of the big corporate job and, you were flying around the world training CEOs and doing really important work. But then what was that big turning point where you were like, this doesn't work for me anymore?
Yeah, so I came here. I was a mechanical engineer in India. I came here and got my master's degree. And I had originally thought I would just go back, but then I got a job, made friends. And, I was 21. It almost like I grew up here in a whole different way, right? And 17 years I worked as an engineer. And my husband and I waited till our late 30s to have kids because that's what we thought we were supposed to do, build this stable career and get set financially, and then you decide to have kids. And 17 years I'd been in corporate. I'd built a good reputation. I was known in the industry. And then when we had kids, I realized that none of that really mattered. I thought I was laying a foundation that when I do decide to have kids, the industry will be aware that I'm still a great employee. I was going to still do good work, but there was no option to have flexibility. Maternity leaves are next to zero. And
this is all pre-pandemic when like remote work, forget it, right? So when you went in and said, hey, I've been with the company 17 years, I want a little more flexibility to be with my kids, what was the reception like?
It was promptly denied. Also, I think that, as certain jobs are just, there's just no remote option. Like I was an engineer, I worked in a factory floor. There was no option to be remote. We could have figured out 1 or 2 days a week, but engineering is also a very conservative industry. They prefer for things to go exactly the way they were supposed to. And it's mostly male dominated, and men don't really care about, or didn't at least care about, being home with their children as much as women did. And it's all changing now.
Yeah, that's one tiny silver lining of the pandemic, is I think all these companies that said, oh, we couldn't possibly get our work done if we're remote. So women, no, you can't have any kind of flexibility in your schedule. Now they can't say that. So even though everyone's going back to work to some degree, I think there's a lot more flexibility than there was before. Absolutely. Okay, so you leave the job, you stay home for a little bit, but you're not just like baking cookies, right? Because you were, you maybe were baking cookies too, but you were real estate investing already. Tell us how that evolved into the business.
I do not know how to bake cookies, so let's just get that out of the way.
There was no cookie baking.
There was no cookies. But so I decided to quit my job, and it was months. I spent months in turmoil because I felt like I was letting a lot of women who came before me down. I was letting my mom down, who was, she was a feminist. She worked really hard to get me to where I was. And then I was talking to my husband, like, how do we do this? How do we become a single income family? And he's like, would it make it eeasier if you quit your job, not just to be with the kids, but to build something of your own? And that really worked for me. And I appreciate that it backed me up. And so I quit my job and decided I was going to pursue real estate investing, and I was going to build it around the lifestyle that I wanted.
And do you know any real estate investors? Like, why did you pick that? Where did that come from?
So we were always interested in real estate. And I had 2 kids back to back. So after my daughter was born, we bought a rental. And we just bought a rent-ready rental. And I realized that it was actually really good cash flow. And if I could just figure out how to scale that, then that would be an amazing thing to do while having time with the kids. So real estate was something I wanted to do. It was just a matter of figuring out how to be a single income family and still scale a portfolio, which, up until that point, I thought was a very capital intensive option.
Yes. And before you tell us how you did that, just in case people are just joining us now, because we're live, I'm with Palak Shah. She is a real estate investor who has built a $10 million portfolio in under 5 years while raising 2 amazing children. And she and her husband, Niti, not only do this investing, but help other people figure out how to do it. So we're hearing her story of how this came to pass. And what I love, Palak, is you've explained to me this is something people can do, while taking care of kids like you did, or while having their corporate job. There's not a lot of things in entrepreneurship where you don't have to go kind of all in right away, which is appealing about this as well.
Right. Absolutely. And in fact, I recommend it, right? Like we don't all have the ability to just quit our job one day and or not have any other responsibilities like raising children or
Yeah, no,
whatever
I
that is.
worked a year and a half at my company while building my first company, doing both at once. So I
Right.
totally get it. And I think there are a lot of people listening who are like, ooh, well, how much money do I need? But we'll get to that. Because of course you need some little bit of seed capital to invest. But
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah. So I think it's important to keep that job and start building something on the side first. It allows you to take a smaller risk, right? And not just burn all the boats from day one. Whether it's keeping that job, if you have a full-time job, or keeping that job as a primary caregiver for your children, which is also a job in itself, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You
And
can
so for
build it.
you, what was the trajectory? Because obviously you didn't start out with a $10 million portfolio. How did you
Yeah,
get there? If you kind of could just give us the, high level arc.
absolutely. So first we bought a couple of rentals, and at that time we both had full-time jobs, and we would save up, every penny from wherever we could, borrow from 401k, get a HELOC. There's so many different ways. We would take a little bit of money that we could find from everywhere, and then we would buy a rental. And that's like putting 20-25% down, 40, $50,000. And so we did that a couple times. And then when I quit my job, that option was gone because now we became a single income family. And so we started researching different real estate investing strategies. And there's a lot of, if you hear a lot of real estate gurus talk, they're all talking about this, oh, zero money down, come with zero money, but you'll have a mansion tomorrow. And we didn't buy any of that. We were like, we don't think none of this is
Like that
real.
sounds like snake oil. Yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't work. But we found that when we talked to veteran real estate investors who've been in this, industry for 30 years, 20 years, they all raved about this one strategy that had worked for you. It's a very old strategy. And then an acronym came out. Brandon Turner, this guy, he came up with this acronym for the strategy that had been done for decades. And it's called the BRRRR strategy. So you buy a distressed property. So you can buy distressed properties lower than market value because not a lot of people want them. And
A
then you
distressed
renovate
means
them.
what is distress for those people not in real
Distressed
estate?
property is a property that needs renovation. It's not
Got it.
really in good condition, right? So you buy a distressed property, so you can buy it for cheap, renovate it, and then rent it out. And then when you take that property that is now renovated and rented out, you have forced it to appreciate. And this is the same strategy that people use to flip properties. They make that difference, right? It appreciated now. The forced appreciation is their profit. Except instead of doing that, we would keep the property, take it to a bank, and that forced appreciation that used to be the profit for a flipper, now that turns into a down payment for an investor who wants to keep that property forever and ever. So we would keep the properties, get all of the money we originally put into it out, create that down payment, and now we have a cash flowing asset. And then you take those funds and move it to the next deal and the next deal and the next deal and grow the portfolio that way. So that's
I
the
love
strategy
that. And
we
of
employ.
course, it's easier said than done, right? Because
Yes,
there's a lot of details involved in that. And I'm curious, how
absolutely.
did your background as a mechanical engineer help you to kind of master that cycle? Because I'm sure a lot of people have tried to do that and not had the success that you've had.
So, two ways I would say. One is because I had always been on a factory floor, I'd always been around areas where I wasn't like in a nice office with a view, never worked in the city, always worked in neighborhoods nobody wanted to go in, always worked in, I was in a glass factory. Like I couldn't even wear the same shoes in the house once I came home. It's horrible,
Oh my
dirty working
God.
conditions, right? So for me, it was very comfortable to walk into distressed properties. That was one thing. But more than that, what really played a role was a lot of people who were implementing this strategy could only do one deal a year because it took so much effort to find the property, to negotiate, to buy it, then to renovate it, work with contractors. People were DIYing things, rent it out, deal with tenants, work with banks. People are taking way too long to do it. The real impact that my background was in systems and processes. And I really understood early on that if I wanted to scale this business, I couldn't do it the way everybody else was doing it. And joined Million Dollar Women.
Well, yes, I think that's where we met each other. It's probably about 5 years ago. So, I mean, you had so many of the key ingredients for success as an entrepreneur, but I'm sure people listening are feeling like, well, I don't have it all dialed in the way Palak does. So, would you mind sharing what didn't you have dialed in when you
Yeah.
first, were looking for help in coaching?
So the thing that I had not understood or figured out, I knew that I wanted systems and processes in place, but having worked in that area as an employee, I had only worked on pieces of the business as an employee. I think the place I needed coaching was really to understand how can I remove myself from this business and still have it work the way I want it to work, where things flow smoothly. Tenants who are our customers, which is, I think, my first phone call with you, that's what you said. They're like, your tenants are your customers. And, how to still keep them happy while removing yourself from the business. And that was like the biggest shift that I needed to make, and really how to not just understand it, but how to implement it in the business. And that was
And
the place I needed the most help.
I remember we worked on kind of removing you from every single piece of the process, building out your team, and that has really paid off. In fact, Niti then left his job, right, and came to work with you, and you guys have been now building this empire together, which I love. But I also want to compliment you on your intentionality around the boundaries around your personal life, and that's something we share, that we were drawn to entrepreneurship in part so that we could have the time we wanted with our children, right? And I think part of why you've been successful also is that you were very protective of that time and uncompromising about it. And that actually leads to more delegation, more outsourcing, more finding solutions. So maybe you could speak about that piece a moment. Like, how have you found that confidence to say, hey, this is the mom I want to be. I'm going to make the business work around that desire and not
Right.
constantly play with those boundaries?
I think it really comes down to knowing why you're doing what you're doing and treating it as the North Star. And as you scale a business, it's very easy to lose sight of that, but constantly coming back to why am I doing this, right? And really making decisions based on what is that why that you're after. And it can evolve with time. There's, as my kids are a little bit older now, they don't need me as much. It's a little bit different now. I can do things I didn't want to do before, but that why, having that in place and really building a business around the lifestyle that I was after, that really helped resolve a lot of mindset issues I had around delegation or automation or even eliminating some tasks. So I think that really knowing why you're doing it, it makes it very easy to make certain decisions that would be hard otherwise.
Well, we find that's one of the hardest parts for entrepreneurs because they're really good at something. So they start a business, right? And then they don't want to kind of let go and hand out pieces of it. It becomes this whole, oh, I'm the only one who can do it. And of course, you're incredibly good at what you do, but you did figure out how to, delegate and outsource those pieces. What advice would you have for someone who's listening, who's like, oh, I think I'm where Pollock was when she was first saying, I have this big vision. I've always wanted to do something big, but right now it's just not taking off the way I wanted to. What are a couple things you would say to them?
Number one, follow a proven model. There is no reason to reinvent the wheel with internet, with access to information and amazing coaches the way we have now. There is no reason for us to struggle on our own. Like, find a proven model, find somebody who you resonate with, who's done what you want to do, and follow their footsteps. And this is why started working with you 5 years ago, Julia. Like, you made sense. You were a mother. You had built a multi-million-dollar business. It made sense that you knew where I was coming from and where I wanted to go. Right. So follow the footsteps of someone who's already figured it out. That's number one. And second, don't be afraid to try multiple things. Like, you may not even, the first thing you try may not even work out. We tried Amazon FBA. We tried an art business. We tried multiple things before we said, okay, this works for what we want to do. Right. So
I
don't be,
love that. And yes,
yeah,
try multiple things. I love that. And you and I will often jump on calls in between board meetings and just compare notes of, okay, what are you trying? What am I trying? And I mean,
yeah,
especially marketing, right? We're all
yeah.
just trying to see which things work. So those are two great pieces of advice. And if you're just joining us, I'm with Palak Shah, who built a $10 million real estate investing business and is helping other people to do that too. And her two big pieces of advice for entrepreneurs trying to get to the seven figures, which is what we're all about here at Million Dollar Women, is to find someone who's been there, done that, and done what you've tried to do. I, like Palak, hired a lot of coaches to help me get to where I am. Most successful business people, and especially women, I will say, have worked with coaches, which is slightly different than mentors. Sometimes people say, oh, find a mentor. But a mentor is someone who's like, jump on the phone with you every so often and kick the tires, right? Helpful. But a coach is someone who's going to show you exactly what they've done and how you can do it. So, that distinction is important. And then your second piece of advice was, now it just went out of my head. Remind me the second thing you said. Something really important. Try lots of things. I just remember.
Yes,
try lots of things. Yes. Try lots of things.
And I think that trying so many things is so hard, because most of us think of, and I think you shared a stat with me early on, was that women start businesses in their 30s or something like late 20s or early 30s.
Right.
And I think at that point, we are so comfortable being knowledgeable and not being a newbie in whatever field we're in. It's very hard to accept that we could fail at something that we try. So it's hard to really just show up as a newbie, show up as somebody who's willing to fail. It's tough, but
you're right.
It's okay.
And to ask for help, right? Part of that is being able to say, I'm good at some pieces of this. I mean, when I remember our first phone call thinking like, whoa, she is brilliant, but she hasn't done the things I've done. So I can bring that to her table, right? And so I think being able to own what you're good at, like when I had my language teaching company, right? I was really good at helping young kids learn a second language through our multimedia program, but I hadn't been a business owner. I needed to bring in coaches and mentors and join programs. So yeah, thank you for that reminder. So what about the fact that you then decided to teach other people what you learned? Where did that come from, and where has that taken you?
So what we did in this business was so different than what everybody else was doing. So most real estate investors who are doing what I wanted to do, they would wake up at 6 a.m. They would, and never against hard work. I wanted to work hard. I just wanted to do it on my own terms, right? They wake up at 6 a.m. They would go to Home Depot, pick up the material for their projects. Then they would pick up subs at Home Depots themselves. They would, there's people usually hanging out, looking for work. They would pick up subs. Then they would take them to their job site and set them up. And then they would be at the project, go from one project to another. And I was thinking to myself, wow, 6 a.m. if I left. Now I have a toddler and a newborn. My husband's got to go to work too, right? This isn't going to work. And so necessity is the mother of invention. Right. So I had to really think of a way to do it differently than everybody else was doing. So I took all the business strategies that we talk about at Million Dollar Women and implemented them within real estate investing. So when we did that, we started scaling so fast. And of course, finance was a big component, really figuring out commercial finance, because that eliminates all of the bottlenecks that you run into when trying to grow a real estate portfolio. We started scaling really fast, and people started asking me, people who had been in this industry for 10, 20 years, they still only had 2, 3, 5 properties. And they said, what are you doing? How do you already have a multi-million-dollar portfolio? You just started last year. Like, what happened? And I hadn't realized that what we were doing was so different. And as I started helping people get over their hurdles and achieve what we had achieved, I realized that people needed help. And so organically, our coaching program just took off, started growing. And I really found my calling. It's my passion now to help other people. It's so amazing to see people get results because of all the systems that we've put in place, right? Now we can give a business in a box to somebody else and they can just implement it. It's pretty amazing to see that.
It's so cool. And I've watched some of your videos and podcasts. You give away a ton of free content. So if anybody watching is like, real estate investing, I've thought about that. You could actually learn a lot with Palak and Niti, just by following them. And we'll get into where to find you in a few minutes because we have to wrap up. Sadly, this is so fascinating. I'd love to, go on and on. But I did want to also point out that this is something that you can do with relatively little cash, right? Palak, yeah. What are we talking, like 25 to 40,000 as a first investment?
Around 25K to get started. And we figured out a way to take that seed money, take it to lenders that specialize in this strategy and borrow the rest of the acquisition and the construction funds. And this allows you to not only start with a little bit of cash, but also have a big brother slash big sister looking over your project, because these lenders have so much experience in this industry. So it's a
Yeah.
true win-win.
That sounds amazing. And, there are so many people reinventing right now, especially post-pandemic. We were talking about how flexible work is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, but a lot of people are being called back to the office right
Yes.
now. And there may be somebody watching thinking, wait a minute, that sounds like a path I'd like to follow. So thank you so much for sharing all those great tips. What is one thing that you wish you had learned earlier that would have made a big difference? And then we're going to wrap up.
I think the big thing that I did not know is there is a difference between income and wealth. Income is something you work on, you have it only until you are working for it. And we made good income, but we did not build wealth. And building wealth is so different. Building wealth is something where your money is going to multiply whether you're working on it or not. And there's a big difference. And the wealthy are teaching their kids how to do that. And we need to learn how to do that so we can teach our
That
kids.
is so important. I love that. And, we're about to have an event here in New York called Women Work Wealth to talk about those very issues. It's almost like income is like a faucet that you turn on, right? But if you turn it off, that's it. No more water coming out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the building wealth is we're creating that reservoir that can pay off for a lifetime. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing all this incredible wisdom with our audience and for being such an active part of our community, not only as a member, but now as a board member. You've helped so many people in the $1 Million Women community, and me. You're my first text. And I need to talk this through.
Same.
Yes. Thank you for that. So yeah, where can people find you, Palak, you and Niti, if they want to learn more?
So here on LinkedIn, of course. But also you can go to my website at openspaceswomen.com and learn more about how you can work privately with us. And I also hang out a lot on Instagram at Open Spaces Women.
Fantastic. And also, as always with these shows, if you want to ask Palak a question, you can even just put it in the comments here and we'll make sure that she gets back to you, because I think a lot of people are curious about real estate investing. It's a big multi-billion-dollar opportunity and you have cracked that code. So congrats on all you've achieved. Thanks for taking a few minutes to share it all with us. And we just love following your journey. We're cheering you on.
Oh, thank you for having me, Julia.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap up. Thank you for joining us today. It's always great to share these amazing women who are building multi-million-dollar businesses. We believe that it's not just the billion-dollar bros who have the great stories. We want to share the stories of multi-million-dollar businesses being built from scratch. So thank you for joining us. If you're looking for help with your business, reach out to us at millionwomen.com and set up a call so we can help you get to your 7-figure dream business. See you next time. Stay brave and go big.